For those that don't know Tim, Tim is a product management coach and consultant, and someone whose content I've actually followed for some time. He's got a bench of amazing product experience with several roles in-house at different industries and different companies. By day, you'll find Tim working with product teams, helping them make more evidence-informed decisions in line with their strategic choices, connecting the dots between product strategy, OKRs, and product discovery, and creating content and courses to support curious product teams. With that, I'm going to welcome Tim, and we'll get things started.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Scott. I really like this introduction. It sounded really, really good, as my ego mind has to admit. So I'm really curious to engage in this topic today with all of you. Hi to those of you who have already joined. As Scott already mentioned today, I want to talk about impact mapping. I called it Impact Mapping Clinic, mainly for the fact that I decided against the, let's say, traditional from the front presentation. I think you can find all of these, so many of these on the internet. So I wanted to keep things a little bit more, I want to say scrappy, but that might sound discrediting. So you will see what I mean when I go through it. So we're going to be in Miro. I will do a lot of work in Miro, but I'm definitely looking forward to gathering your inputs and your contributions through the chat in Zoom, which might help me fill in some of these bits and blanks today. So as mentioned, impact mapping is the topic I want to talk about today. And if I would really have to summarize it, impact mapping really is a visual way to connect discovery tactics with company priorities. And that sounds very like a lofty mission. So let's get into it. What I'm actually talking about when I mean that. So here's the rough overview, the rough agenda for what we're going to cover today. First of all, I always love to go back to the roots of any kind of framework that I talk about, to expose where it's happening from, to contribute, to credit other contributors. So we're going to start with a personal history of impact mapping. Then I want to dive deeper into the individual building blocks and connections of impact mapping. And then we're actually going to try to build an impact map. Let's see how that goes. It's not a prepared example. It's something I really am looking forward to co-creating with all of you. And we should definitely have some time for Q&A at the end. As Scott mentioned, we can do the Q&A in Miro. We will do the Q&A in Miro. There's a separate space, a separate frame in Miro where you can, through the post-it notes, where you can add your questions. Sounds good? Everybody still on board, excited, looking forward? Yes, yes. Sounds good. Perfect. All right, let's jump right in. So as I mentioned, with every kind of framework, I really, really like to go back to the basics, to the roots, I think it's always helpful to understand where someone was coming from, because basically, to quote Austin Kleon, everything is a remix, right? And I think there's certainly no shortage of remixes in product management. And sometimes to understand the way certain frameworks are being used today, one of the best ways to do that is to go back to their roots. And I had to do some digging, I have to admit. I have to do some digging to figure out what are the roots of impact mapping. And thankfully, I found one of the sources, which goes back to 2007, which is about a book called Effect Managing IT. Not that exciting of a title, but in it, Ingrid Otterston and Mitya Balic have introduced the concept of the effect mapping. And from that, fairly unpopular framework, at least from my perspective, resulted the more formal way of impact mapping, the way we see it right now, or we have seen it out there maybe, which comes from the book, which was published in 2009 by Gojko Acic, who wrote the book Impact Mapping. And his version, his interpretation, which really, really kicked things off and really established a new way of thinking, connecting the dots. It took a couple more years until I discovered impact mapping and I put it into practice. So this was, I would say, rather in the first third, the early percentages or first percentages of my product management career. This is one example. I explicitly went for this scrappy picture from the archives to illustrate that all these nice polished frameworks we see out there are that's not always how they look in practice. So that is the messy reality of one version of impact mapping that I was working through together with a couple of amazing discovery collaborators around 2014, 2015. So that is the messy reality, right? To putting things together, using physical post-it notes, going back and forth and engaging in activities and revisiting things, doing stakeholder updates, all the fun stuff. So that was the first time I got really introduced to impact mapping. I really understood it. I started practicing it. And it has been a steady companion throughout my career. I used it for many different use cases so far. And today I want to use a slightly iterated version, which at least on paper looks more neat and pretty, I have to admit. That's a slightly iterated version. I swapped out some words, added the level, like you will look at all the levels of detail, but that's the version I loosely, probably 2017, 2018, 2019, I started to experiment with this slight iteration. And that's one I've been using whenever I work with teams, mostly the domains of OKRs or product discovery. So that's the brief personal history of impact mapping. I'm curious, like who of you in the chat has either heard of impact mapping or is already using it? That would be really interesting to me to see what's the level of experience among people in here. Okay, Alex is using it. David is not. First time hearing about it. Opportunity solution tree. Yeah, that's a common question. We're going to cover that at the end, Sarah. So if you want to add that to the if you want to add that to the Q&A box, I'm happy to talk about how it compares to other frameworks. First time, heard of it, haven't used it. Some questions regarding similarity, OKRs, of course, impact metrics, not mapping, using it. Nice, similar OST, tried implementing it. Opportunity mapping, got it. Yes. Yes. Okay, that's cool. That feels like a nice mix of people who are practicing some kind of similar mapping techniques. And people who are really just curious to dive right in. That's what we're going to do. We're going to dive right in. So we are going to look at the building blocks and connections of impact mapping. And so you already have seen these 5 levels of impact mapping that I introduced in this initial version, the slide adaptation I like to use. So essentially at the top, you can say like, every level of the impact map tries to answer one specific question. And the first level of the impact map, the impact, tries to answer the question of why. Like, why does this matter? Why do we care about this? And in this definition, to make it a little bit more clear, like the way the definition I picked up from other smart folks, and that really resonates with me, is that an impact is really describing this company or department-wide measure of success. It's oftentimes very directly tied to product strategy choice, something that one team individually rarely can influence. So it requires multiple teams to coming together, but it's still something that gives you orientation. What I'm seeing very often is that these impact metrics either symbolize user growth, engagement, monetization, satisfaction, process quality, lots of different options of what you can express there, and things to look for, like, because the question oftentimes is, where to get started? Where do I get this impact from? You would want to look at things like the product strategy. You would want to look at things like the company level OKRs. You want to look at any kind of alignment frameworks or one-pagers you might be using, whether it's Stephen Bungai's mission briefing, whether it's the working backwards or intercom intermission, whatever is your flavor, right? So that's the impact map at the very top, the impact map metric, the first level. So I would be curious, since we're going to build an impact map later on together, but I want everybody to get into the rhythm, the practice of impact mapping a little bit. So I would be curious, like, what is an impact metric, potentially an impact metric in your company that ticks these boxes, right? So it's a company-wide or department, depending on the size, company-wide measure of success. It's a metric. It's fairly lagging, rather high. It's not just as generic as revenue. It should be more specific. We want to tie it to specific strategy choices. What might be some examples in your company that would count as an impact? Just drop these in the chat. I'm just going to make sure to take some notes so we have some examples for when everybody revisits the board later on. What might be some impact metrics? And PS, again, I think it shouldn't just be a generic KPI, right? It should be something like NPS in a specific market segment, right? Potentially a new market segment, something like that. We don't just want to chase random KPIs. Another example was number of developers on the bench, not currently active on projects, right? So it's like usage of dev resources. That might be not good wording. Volume of listings. That's a good one. Again, hopefully in a more specific context. Trying to keep up on a couple of these. Share of returning users, renewals, net retention, migrated customers from one technical platform to another. This one I like, Anton. This is good. And this is also one of the most important bits. We oftentimes talk to teams who have internal products, which might struggle with talking about the user because they don't have access to the end user. This is another common thing when you're launching a new platform internally, to make sure that you have customers, you have users, or as John Cutler recently called them, fittingly partners, and you can create a change for them. So these would be a couple of examples. Again, we're looking for large lagging indicators that represent specific strategic choices and which require more teams to contribute, right? So that's what we're trying to achieve. And then the other one from L.I. McLean, number of APIs considered quality. That's a really good one. I like that, how specific it is. Cool. Now let's move on. Let's look at the second level of the impact map. We have the why, right? We have the impact, what we're trying to achieve here. And this is like the second and the third level of the map are probably by far my favorites. The second level is about trying to answer the question of who. And this is addresses one of the most common struggling moments I see whenever I work with teams. They just default to any kind of research. They get lost in averages and interviewing and survey, whatever. And they like specificity. Specificity in terms of, well, which segment, which part of our audience is actually relevant and provides high leverage for contributing to this overarching impact. So the question we're trying to answer here, who has a problem that prevents us, meaning the product team, from achieving the impact? And the terminology that's being used in the impact mapping language is called actors. And again, I think it's a nice broad phrasing because it doesn't get you into this whole discussion of, do you mean user, customer, buyer, stakeholder? Actors can include all of that, right? So we look at actors, and this thing that stuck with me from the initial book from Gojko Achitz back then was, he said, you can think of it in on-stage and off-stage actors. And what I like about this is, for example, an on-stage actor might be someone who's actively using your product very directly. They are the user. And maybe off-stage actors are people where your product still has a relevance for them and it's impacting them, but they might not use it directly. So they are these off-stage supporting actors. And the other thing is that what kind of actors you're going to put there is not just based on static attributes, right? This is not about personas or just saying new user, returning user. You want to look at segmentation based on the attributes that are relevant to the overarching impact. So for example, if I would have an overarching impact from something around monetization, my segmentation criteria for actors would be to say, okay, I'm probably going to segment, if we're looking for leverage, I'm probably going to look at the degree of monetization in my segments. So I'm going to look at people who are probably currently in a free trial, who have churned, who are currently paying, who are paying for this plan, who have really deleted the product. And so this is, for example, one segmentation in the context of monetization. For NPS, it would be very easy. You would probably segment along the lines of detractors, promoters, whatever might be in between with NPS. So just to give you an example, the segmentation of actors and selection is contextual to the impact and not a per se universal definition. So what I like about this, again, it encourages you to look beyond the power user and it helps you to think about what kind of adjacent actors might play a role for the core power users I always like to care about. Right? That doesn't mean that you will solve problems for all of them, but it helps you to understand the range of options you're having when it comes to research focus. So what might be some actors in your company? Just shoot some examples to the chat. I'm happy to type them up. Maybe just post 1 or 2 actors per chat message, so we have some variety here, not just one actor. It doesn't have to be related to your previous impact you might have posted. I'm not going to hold you accountable to that. Just shoot some examples. CFO, exactly, that's a good one. Account managers, sure. Legal. People who list products, I love that. Onboarding team, marketing team, exactly. Internal audiences also relevant. Competitors. That's something interesting, Jonathan. We get back to that. Let's see if we can pick the thread up regarding competitors. I'm gonna add a question mark to that. Dormant users. Operation, yeah, exactly. So I like that all of you seem to catch on with this idea. These could be the supporting departments like admin, administration, or operations. And the funny thing is that you can think of these, you can find these actors, these supporting actors internally in your company, but also in the other companies of your users. So let me tell you what one example I had when I was building in an in-house role. I was building a Jira integration, a Jira plugin for the product I was building, an A/B testing solution. And we were talking to our users, right? Our direct users who were also buying for our product and who would use us in Jira. And we're trying to understand the landscape essentially. And what we uncovered as additional actors were On the one hand, you had our users who would use our product, had all the full context, and when they would see an integration in their Jira instance, everything made sense. There were also these people who would use this Jira instance, but who were not our customers. So they lacked context. What kind of problems were they potentially having? Would they be relevant in the context of our goal? And another one was also the IT administrators within our clients' companies, right? Naturally, they would not use our product directly, but they had problems that might have been worth solving around compliance, technical feasibility, and all the other good stuff. So that's another example from how you go from that's the user and then broadly uncover other actors that might be in there. Depending on the complexity of your actors level, I sometimes encourage teams to work with sub-levels there. You might have something like mobile and desktop or country-specific umbrellas. And within these countries, you segment people like people who list products, people who have listed product once, twice, power sellers, and you repeat this kind of segmentation per market, for example. These could be various ways how you could simplify that even further. Sounds good? What do you guys think of the actors level? How does that land with you? Okay, take that as a yes. I'm just going to move on. So the third level, I told you that I like the second and the third level the most. So we have the impact, we have the actor, we have the outcome, right? The outcome. Thing with outcomes is that it's probably one of the most used terms in our industry. Yet when you look it up or you talk to people, you have a gazillion different interpretations. And I'm not here to tell you what the right definition is. I'm just going to tell you what the definition is that works best for me and my clients, which comes from Josh Seiden, who basically wrote in his book, Outcomes Over Output, who said, an outcome is a change in human behavior that ultimately drives an impact or creates value. And so I like to run with that. And I think it's kind of fitting because it works well with this actor analogy to say, look, we're trying to describe change in human behavior. So it makes sense that we select what kind of humans we actually care about first through the actors, right? So I like this. The question the outcome tries to answer is really, well, how do we have to change the behavior of actors to achieve the impact or to contribute to the impact? Of course, we don't want to list all the outcomes that might be possible. You could spend all day long talking to all the users, writing all the outcomes, and you want to make sure that you show how the behavior is different from what is currently possible, right? So that's the key bit of the outcome. And I'm gonna share one example with you, which I like to share as an illustration of where this interpretation might be going wrong. So I was once working with a client in the e-commerce space that had an impact around a certain, I think conversion rate was it. And they did an actor segmentation along the lines of device usage because there was a correlation between conversion rate and device usage. So naturally, you want to focus on the highest leverage segment. They focused on mobile users, I think. And one outcome they were coming up with was make mobile users put more things in their basket. You could say like, well, okay, that is a change in behavior. Anybody have an idea? What's the problem? What could be problematic about this outcome? Have mobile users, whatever actors, put more things in their basket. They may not buy. Yeah, get it. But from, let's say, declining AOV, yeah, potentially. But you could argue that might be like a boundary. You can game it, of course, but you can game probably everything. It's an impact. Well, I'm not sure. I think it is a user. I think it's a user change. It's already possible. That's true. David, you could say putting more things in the basket, that could be the change. So let me tell you my perspective. My problem with that is that that's what the company wants. That's a change in behavior the company wants from the users. It's probably not that users are calling them up and tell them, hey, please, I want to put more things in my basket. That's the only thing that prevents me from spending from easier conversion with you. So it's a telltale sign of not having a real understanding of what the actual problems of these actors are in the light of your impact, right? So that's where we tie things back to discovery. If you don't understand the problem, you can't name the real outcome. And I don't know the exact results of this discovery moving forward from after that initial discussion, but an outcome that would be at least technically more correct would be literally sitting down, quote unquote, as a placeholder for every research activity with people and watch them, how they scroll the page, how do they buy, figure out, hey, why don't you buy more things? I'm paraphrasing. Of course, that's a terrible research question or interview question, but eventually you might stumble on things where people tell you, look, I don't know how my shipping time is impacted when I put more things in the basket. It's like, oh, interesting. So the change in behavior, the outcome would be make it, people can immediately see the impact on the shipping times for multiple items in the basket. That's a mouthful, but you get the idea. It's about understanding the problem and then figuring out, okay, if it's a problem worth solving in the light of what we're trying to achieve for a relevant segment, not necessarily just writing the outcomes that you care about. Right? So with that out there, what might be some examples that come to your mind that might be relevant in your company or apply to your product of outcomes? Again, doesn't have to be consistent with previous things you posted, but I'm curious to hear some outcomes. We don't have to worry about measurability so far, just describe the outcome as a more qualitative statement. We get to the measurement part later on. What are outcomes for some specific actors in your company you know are real, or, I mean, I want to figure out if they're not real. Just drop them in here just to collect some examples. Conversion rate? Nah, Benjamin, that's not what I'm looking for. Potential clients understanding services better. Well, yeah. I think I would want to be more specific. As in, what does that mean, right? It's too unspecific for me. I would be interested in what kind of understanding is lacking, right? Get more relevant job offers. Well, yeah, sort of. Again, would be a bit too unspecific for my taste. Less effort in internal process. Yeah, I like that. Make purchasing easier. Again, I would want to look, Benjamin, I would look for something more specific, like what is making it hard right now? Basically, you can flip it around. If you say, want to make purchasing easier, but like, what is making it hard? So what's the specific issue they're experiencing? So drilling into that, what's the specific problem that's making it hard right now? You can already see that how vital it is to actually understand what the customers are saying or users are saying or your actors are saying to be able to articulate a real outcome, not just like a random wish what you want them to do. Okay, so that's the outcome. Let's continue. After here, I can tell you, after here, it only gets easier. We're entering the solution space. Everybody can get out their idea backlogs and Excel sheets and start putting outputs to the wall. We arrived the holy land of solution space. And the output is basically about figuring out, well, which solution, which activity am I going to pursue to drive this proven outcome for this group of actor? So we're trying to answer the question, what are the solutions that are going to create the outcome for an actor? This is, of course, something that's gradually filled and should be happening through structured ideation. Important thing, this is not a promise. Just because the impact map contains output doesn't mean that is a promise, not a roadmap, it's not a backlog. It's, of course, just a high-level deliverable. These are options, right? These are options you could pursue to drive this outcome. So that's what I like about the impact map, that connects these dots even further. And honestly, I'm tempted to continue the path of asking you for examples, but I'm pretty sure all of you are pretty well-versed in listing outputs. So I'm gonna skip that for now and save that time for Q&A. So the last level then, which is the one I think it's crucial to say, okay, below the output, if the output is not a given promise, we want to make sure that we test the most critical assumptions of each output. The question we're trying to answer is, well, we want to understand whether a solution is actually worth implementing based on insights and evidence. This, again, should happen through qualitative and quantitative experiments. So this is the level that ties into all these fun discovery activities a lot. Again, we're going to skip the examples for now, just so that you get the understanding. And all of this really creates a narrative, right? It creates a narrative of like, well, we're focusing on this feature because we found that this example, this outcome is really pressing for this high leverage actor group, which is relevant in the context of our impact. And so that's what I really like about this, that it helps you create this narrative, right? And if you would loosely connect that, right? And of course, discovery is never as linear as following one path. And like, there's rarely this neat separation between the problem space and the solution space. But loosely speaking, when you find yourself stuck at what point of the impact map, I found that to be a helpful guiding principle for, okay, what activities might help me get more clarity? So if you're stuck on the upper three levels, if you're stuck on the impact, revisit the company OKRs, the product strategy and management alignment. Actors, again, partially comes from strategy. Alignment with other teams, mission clarification, outcome very clearly results from quantitative research, which should also surface new actors. Output, again, comes from ideation and testing. The solution space bits all center around ideation, prototyping, testing, and ultimately refining. So that's a loose connection. Of course, you will continuously go up and down the impact map. You will constantly, as you remember my previous picture from 2014, it's rarely as linear. It's almost never as linear, to be honest. But I also promised you that it has other connections, right? And so I want to use this perfectly polished, neat graphic illustrating and answering all the questions about the different domains that are connected to impact map. Loosely speaking, right? When you have this unclarity around, well, what's my impact? What's the impact I'm trying to drive? Which actors are really relevant for me? That's a strategy question, most likely product strategy question, rarely company strategy, give or take, depending on the level of the company. You have your OKRs, which should help you to figure out, well, okay, what kind of outcomes do I prioritize? And the impact map informs your OKRs, vice versa, as well as the outputs. And discovery, again, happens along the lines of which actors are relevant, which outcomes for them are relevant, outputs and experiments on the same part. So that's the loose connection of these bits. And before we dive into building an impact map of our own, I want to recap this whole bit of like this. You could call it this theory bit, this input bit around the impact map. So I would say, what is it? What is an impact map? At its core, as teased in the description of the session, it is a visual aid to connect the messy inputs and insights of discovery. It is also a lightweight way to communicate work in progress and insights, decisions. That's one of my superpowers, or my favorite superpowers of the map. And so when you do stakeholder updates or want to bring people on board who are not permanent discovery collaborators, you can show them this process and have them navigate that, understand that. You can showcase the trade-offs. You said, well, we went for this actor over that actor because they have a 80% percentage within this target audience that's relevant for the impact. So you can make trade-offs clear. The simplified impact map always connects to all the messy stuff you have to do around discovery. And it's also a modifiable way to recognize misguided outputs or gaps in audience understanding. That's another, I think, really fun way to start with impact map, which I will talk about in a second, what might be the use cases. But also on the other hand, what isn't an impact map? It's not just a template, right? As you probably have recognized from some of these examples, just writing a technically correct outcome on there doesn't make it real, right? Just because the outcome looks pretty doesn't make it real, doesn't connect it to a real problem. So it's not just something you fill out. It has to be fed through the actual messy work of discovery. It's also not a replacement for insufficient or non-existent discovery practices. Remember people telling you, oh, people should put more things in their basket when that's not a real problem. And it's also not a linear plan to execution, right? It's not a step-by-step process with gatekeeping and all that kind of stuff. It's really just the representation of the messy reality and makes it in a slightly prettier shape, I would say. So use cases. I've seen a couple of interesting use cases for impact mapping. One being that it's kind of nice to start with the output level, right? This oftentimes demonized word in our industry, beware the outputs. Oh my God, he said it. It can be quite freeing for a lot of teams to start on the outputs level because that's their language, depending on where they stand, where they sit right now. That might be their starting point. That's what they are taught to do for months and years. And so having them list the outputs they're currently working on, the projects, the features, and then to basically map it back to the potential outcomes or unknown outcomes and finally have this clarifying discussion around which actors do we actually care about and what's the strategic goal we care about. This can be so freeing. So it can help uncover the gaps in your practice. For slightly more mature teams or more experienced teams, it can also mean that you use it to continuously document research insights, prioritize next steps. It's nothing that you say, my impact map is done. You already have heard that, leave alone experience that. Again, it's also a nice way when you just think about, okay, with all these ideas, we have prioritized them through some dot voting, maybe did some scoring, whatever. What do we do next with them? Again, tying the ideas to outcomes helps you to run the right experiments with the right people, look for the right metrics. And that's, again, it's a little bit of a hidden thing, but I like to use it with the OKR definition as well, because once you have understood what outcome is actually relevant in your target audience, it's much easier to define outcome OKRs, to turn this outcome into something tangible, to think about which metric will actually help me do that, and make that more explicit. When you say, like, where does this outcome OKR come from? Well, that's from the impact map. This impact map has been fed by insights. So that's the rundown of impact mapping building blocks. And I would now want to jump into a probably very interestingly improvised example of how to build an impact map. Just want to make sure how that stuff is landing with all of you. Let me know in the chat what's going through your head right now. Are you still with me, ready for this next part of the journey? Okay, I see some thumbs hovering on my screen. I take that as a sign of encouragement. I haven't seen that before. It must be a new feature. Thanks, Alex. That sounds good. All right. So I told you today is not a polished presentation. Today is a little bit more scrappy. I find that it's easiest for me to thrive in that kind of environment. And so it's not a fully prepared impact map, right? I'm not looking for right or wrong things. So let's try to build one sort of together. I was going to throw out this example case. It's a company that's called Mindful Movement. That's fictional. Like all of the stuff is made up, right? So I'm not spilling any company secrets. And so it's called Mindful Movement, and Mindful Movement is a digital fitness company, to put it bluntly. And the company vision says the vision is adults can get closer to the best version of themselves on their own time, anytime and anywhere. That's a duplicate in there. Sorry for not catching that. You get the idea. I think what goes hand in hand with the great vision very often is a North Star metric, which can be easily derived from a vision level. So in a vision like that, you might look at a North Star metric like the number of weeks spent in fulfilling shape per person, right? Best version of yourself happens to be a great shape. So that's the company level for rough context, okay? Now I want to operate on a product team, product area level, whatever kind of terminology works best for you. So I try to abstract it one level down even further. And so within this company, we have a product area centered around mental fitness, right? Mental fitness, not just physical, best shape of your life, doesn't just mean physical health. It could also mean mental health or mental fitness. And this area came up with a vision which roughly reads like, users feel like confident athletes about approaching physical challenges to achieve their greatest fitness goals. That's their vision, right? That's what they're going after. And their North Star metric from a product level perspective, basically like below this company level, would be the number of anxious users performing the sport or action they previously felt blocked to do, right? So it's like, okay, this really is about empowering people and unblock them mentally. And as part of that, like this whole area and this vision and this North Star metric resulted from a specific product strategy choice. Right now, we're getting into the weeds of it and saying, look, there has been this specific choice that has been made, which as a summary of all the messiness of strategy reads like, we enable inexperienced users to tackle more ambitious physical challenges by preparing them mentally to step outside their comfort zone through mental fitness education. So it's a very synthesized strategy statement, leaving lots of things open, as a strategy statement should, but still sort of specific enough of where you want to go. And I want coming from this strategy choice, I want to start building an impact map together with you. So I'm just looking for some examples of where we could connect the dots. I have this impact map here. I'm going to time box this to, let's say, 10 minutes in total to make sure we have enough time left for the Q&A. So yeah, let's start at the top. Let's start with an impact. Hit me with examples for what could be an impact metric working here. Number of users, well, yeah, but I would like to be more specific. What would be a specific metric telling you that this strategy, basically try to answer the question, how would you know that this strategy has worked out? Time spent using the product, yeah. Let's get more specific, folks. Someone posted monthly active user, Mao. Number of users testing a new sport. I love this one. Time spent outside their comfort zone. This is nice. Users taking on more difficult exercises. I like that. Golden dad. Cool. I like it. Let's leave it at that. Again, we want to keep it hands-on. Again, so I shared some of these, some of my thoughts already. I think these are a little bit too broad from my perspective. These could also be generic KPIs and not specific. These will be difficult to give the team guidance of where to start. I also took a stab at what could be a metric. I landed on something like a mental readiness score among inexperienced users. And you could put the other one in brackets. So that was my step. Again, it's not about right or wrong. It's about landing on the right type of metric right here. I love the time spent outside their comfort zone. I have to admit, I really like that. Let's roll with that. Also, I would never have shown my ego to pick my own example. So time spent outside their comfort zone. It's like that. Again, I'm not looking for correctness here. It's, of course, it has to be a metric to that, but we're gonna like X hours per month to make it a little bit more metric-y. Cool. So I'm looking for potential actors. What kind of actors could we might be relevant? Again, we might not solve for all these users, but what might be a lazy user who don't want to exercise much? Love that. Lazy user. I'm just going to type lazy user. And of course, you would want to quantify that, right? When you have a discussion, you would want to quantify that, right? Segment by age. These could be umbrella categories, as I mentioned earlier. Cheerleaders, okay. Love that. New users, yeah, 30 days. Single young professionals, yeah. You can already see it's so fun because there's so many different layers of how you could segment the audience, right? And of course, the tricky thing is to figure out, well, which attribute is most relevant for the goal. So like how would I categorize that in the context of the outside the comfort zone? So yes, Alex, great point. Health provider coach. That would be an offstage actor. That's a really good one. Yeah. Consider themselves to be novice. Yeah, novice versus advanced self-evaluation. Of course, this is not a consistent, should segmentation be perfectly aligned with personas? No, it shouldn't be. Because again, very often, depending on how you do personas, of course, most of the stuff in regular personas might not be as relevant to the impact. So I would primarily look at the criteria relevant to the goal, right? So I would say, look, lazy users make a lot of sense because chances are lazy users don't spend a lot of time out of their comfort zone. So there's a big leverage here to improve this, to increase this time spent. You might have the lazy users, and you maybe also have the active users, and you have the the adrenaline junkies, which already spend a lot of time outside their comfort zone. So it doesn't make sense to focus on the adrenaline junkies, presumably, compared to the lazy users, because that would be the biggest leverage. So we're looking for leverage. We want to look at, we want to quantify things. We want to quantify the leverage we might have, okay? Again, I think it was Alex who brought in health provider coach. I think another one might be, and again, this is a bit of my imagination going wild, it might be the spouse of someone. Maybe they can help them as well, right? Maybe the spouses can play a role in nudging people outside their comfort zone. Health provider coaches might be more on the, parents as well, depending on the age demographic. So you see where this is going. I love how this on-stage, off-stage actor categorization catches on and seems to land with people. Let's go with the lazy user, right? Let's park everything except for that one bit, clean it a bit up so the sport is more nice. Again, I like this important. You could categorize by age, by fitness level. This could be an overarching thing. Another aspect I thought about might be like previous injuries or previous failures as well, right? You might be more mentally blocked. Maybe it turns out, well, you don't spend much time outside your comfort zone because you had a bad accident, you had surgery, you're not confident in your ability to test and push your body. So this could be another aspect, right? Like medical history. So let's look at the lazy user, right? And so now the question we're trying to answer, I'm trying to spell it out for you. What is preventing the lazy user or the actor to spend more time outside their comfort zone? And basically, this would be already a research intent question. Right? That is not an interview question, but that's how how the impact map connects to product discovery. what is preventing the actor to spend more time outside the comfort zone is a great research intent question. You would use that to figure out, okay, do we do an interview? Do we do a survey? Do we do a diary study? Whatever research technique might be, might help you here, right? So that's the question we would want to go with. We know that. Okay, so hit me with some outcomes. What kind of changes in behavior could we create for the lazy user? So try to, yes, I wrote that what is preventing the actor, but try to phrase it as the outcome. So for example, lack of sport equipment becomes sport equipment always at hands. Maybe that, okay. Fear of muscle soreness, okay. Unclear motivation. Let's see, what else do we have here? Overwhelmed. So let's take this as an example. If overwhelmed is the problem, the outcome would be ease the prioritization of family responsibilities and personal health. Probably lots of typos in here, but this could be one outcome, right? Lack of time, again, but again, what would be the outcome? Lack of time is the problem. What's the outcome? Hannah, Jennifer, maybe you have an idea. If lack of time is the problem, flip it on its head, right? An outcome is basically a problem flipped on its head. How would the positive change in behavior look like? Better able to manage time, yes. Again, from this example, I would let you go through with that. It's probably too unspecific. Exercise part of daily routine, right? Routine, I like this one. Be depressed, focusing on mental health, preparedness, gotta be something there. Exactly, Ryan, that's a good point. So maybe it is, I don't know, pick up confidence for trying something new. Right, making a ritual out of training. I like that. So you see where this is going, right? Feeling motivated, X times per week, accountability. You get the idea. I love that. So, and again, the thing I forgot to mention, but this is so critical. People always wonder, how do I articulate an outcome? How do I know what is an outcome? And I mentioned it earlier, it has to be rooted in a real problem, but the problem itself is not the outcome. It's confusing. Product management, language, we love that shit. It's about understanding the problem and then deriving, okay, the problem is real. How does basically the better future, the outcome, the change in behavior look like for this actor? How would I flip it on its head? Because you don't want to work on the problem. You want to create the change in behavior. Right? The problem is just the proxy that allows you to see it essentially. Okay, we did this. Let's pick make exercise part of daily routine. Let's stick with the more mental aspect. Let's pick up the boost in self-confidence, urgency to get started. Let's do this. Pick up confidence for trying something new, to stay focused, because that's the other bit of impact map. You constantly want to check yourself against the overarching impact, right? How does this work? Which of these outcomes has the biggest potential? And just like we prioritize the actor based on quantification, which outcome is it? So now it gets easy, right? We're just gonna throw some ideas against the wall. Hit me with some feature ideas for the mental fitness product area of mindful motivation they could build. What kind of feature ideas do you have? Come on, product people. Gamification thingy, exactly. Stuff product managers would say. Gamification thingy. I'm just going to type that up exactly as you said it, Michael. Gamification, yeah. Visualization, meditations, beginner guide, motivational messages, community chat feature, progress tracker, tiers, exactly. Maybe you have a buddy system, accountability partner. You're right, peer-to-peer, Laura, great point. Success stories. I think you might have also things like, for example, I remember a couple of years back, right, mentors couple of years back, I was trying out Calm, the meditation app, and they had recently signed LeBron James. And that was so fun to listen to LeBron James' mental toughness thoughts to get into his pregame routine and shape. And like, you know, like maybe elite athlete content or whatever. Okay. Calendar connections, right? Injury prevention. Okay. All right. Let's leave it at that. Again, I was sure product managers would not disappoint me. Features, all the features, we love the features. So let's maybe pick up, I love the peer-to-peer idea, mentors, peer-to-peer. Let's think of a couple of experiments. How could we test the most critical assumptions behind this feature idea? Hit me with some experiments. You don't have to spell it out in an insane detailed way. Just what kind of experiments could we run to test this? Again, this is all about these discovery practices all of us love. Pairing people, right? So pairing people would be like a very manual thing. Pairing people manually. So you want to do like a Wizard of Oz kind of thingy, high manual effort, not a big, not that scalable, just to see if it works as well. Pairing people manually like that. What else? How could you test whatever that means? Fake door, exactly. We love a good fake door. Bring your buddy couple, love that. In-person trial. Exactly. One more idea. How could you test this feature? The most critical assumptions behind the idea. Okay, I'm just going to throw one at you. You could do just a prototype usability testing, right? Wizard of Oz, exactly. Usability test. You could just see, well, can people use this thing the way we imagine it? Cool, congratulations. Some of you just completed their first impact map. And of course, it's not meant to be the most perfect example. It's more about, with these exercises, it's about getting you into the rhythm, understanding how the bits connected and the building blocks connect. I hope that did the job for that. I really enjoyed that. Again, I didn't have a prepared map in mind, so I really loved going through that with you. Thanks for sticking with me, and kudos. With one eye on the clock, we have about 10 minutes left, right, Scott? I want to get to a couple of questions. Honestly, I'm just going to go through it from top to bottom and see how far we get until Scott cuts me off. So I'm just going to do my best to run through it. So how is it similar, different to OKRs, opportunity solution trees? Short answer, two different things, right? From OKRs to me, and I will jump back and forth through the board to make it more tangible. My perspective is that in terms of OKRs, the impact and the outcome are the closest when it comes to OKRs, because they, again, like when you're trying to define the impact, you want to look for the company key results. The outcome level is more of an input to the key result definition on a team level, because if you want outcome key results, you have to be able to name the outcome, which requires you to understand the problem. So I see it as an input for OKR definition. When it comes to opportunity solution trees, I've seen that a couple of times here, so I'm just going to try to do my best to differentiate it. The key, I see two key differences. Teresa might disagree, I'm not sure, but here are my two differences. One is, it starts at a slightly higher level with the impact. It aims to connect directly to the strategy by using the impact metric. That's one of my differentiations, and what I like about the impact map a lot. And the second major difference is that it introduces the actor level, right, to basically as a pre-filter for prioritizing discovery and research activities. So that's my take on it. That's how I see I differentiate it. Again, with all frameworks, I think it's always a question of, does the framework help you with the challenge at hand? For me, my work, the impact map just flows a little bit better. I also got introduced to the impact map way earlier, before I knew about the OST from Teresa. And so that's my personal preference. I think it brings some benefits to the table. I'm just going to type briefly up impact from company OKRs, outcomes inform team OKRs. That's how I would frame it. In terms of OSTs, impact as a higher level starting point, and actors as additional filter or layer, I would say, to be more focused on who you're talking to and with whom you're doing research. Okay. I hope that was helpful for those who answered it. If not, try to follow up with me by email or LinkedIn if you want to. So it's going to mark these so I know at least I try to answer them. Could you repeat the difference between on-stage, off-stage? Yes. So on-stage, I would synthesize as on-stage are these people who really directly use your product, who have a direct interaction with your product. Off-stage are more of the supporting kind of act or implicit users of your product. So, for example, internal supporting teams like product operations or product analytics or data science, or on your customer side, IT administrators, sales, procurement, or someone in between. You might have for example, think of it, you have a B2B product you build for users, but these users also use your product to communicate with their bosses. So the buyer or the CEO, the head of department might be an offstage actor, not directly talking to you about the problems, but they are exposed to your product, right? So on stage, direct users, direct interaction. Off stage, indirect or supporting interaction. Not straight off stage. God. Okay. I'm a bit confused by the outcomes piece. How do you typically phrase this? Is this in relation to a problem you're trying to solve for the user, Kate? Exactly. I think you already answered it. Yes, the outcome results from the problem you're trying to solve. I wrote a piece on that in one of my newsletter editions, trying to demystify this. How do you arrive at outcomes? By detangling or untangling all the research bits you're doing. So Kate, if you want to, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email. I'm happy to share this article with you to make it more tangible, hopefully. Hope to shine some more lights on that. I don't want people to leave more confused. Am I wrong to say that impact mapping is an ongoing process, understanding how to define outcomes better? No, you're not wrong to say. I think it's a fairly ongoing process, to be honest. Full stop. Teams it's like strategy. It's like strategy is never finished. It's always to a certain degree ongoing. Teams might have multiple impact maps because they focus shift. They might have different paths they're exploring that focuses on. How do you decide what actor to choose? I try to make it as data informed as possible, right? So again, I try to use the word leverage in here. So we want to look at the impact we're trying to drive. So which segments have the biggest potential leverage to help us contribute to these impacts? So that's what I would do, making that. Other best practices to build a business case from an impact map. I'm not aware of them. If you find anything, let me know. Interesting topic. I never had to answer that question. I also never thought about that because most of the time I work with teams who are, let's say, funded for a year or so, and then it's just about reducing uncertainty as much as possible. Yeah, and then probably you have to do some calculations to figure out, is it a viable opportunity in terms of assumed conversion rates, all that kind of stuff. So sorry, I would mark that orange because I haven't really answered it. Should the impact be quantifiable? Yes. Full stop, the impact should be quantifiable. Otherwise, it's too floppy. It doesn't provide enough direction. Again, if you think of these as company key results should be quantifiable. For the outcomes, yes. These outcomes don't seem that way, sort of intended. I think for me, there's a differentiation. There is the actual articulation of the outcome, what you want people to do differently, and then to make this measurable, right? I think it's a two-step process to say, okay, now if you want to focus on this outcome, if you want to try to achieve it, maybe you want to turn it into a team key result, yes, you should quantify it. So you should figure out, is it just this outcome? Do I just have to slap a metric on it or not? So that would be my take on that. Should be quantifiable. Again, when first uncovering it, I think it's fine to keep it qualitatively. Should segmentation be aligned with personas? I think I read that already. I would say no, it shouldn't be. It doesn't have to be, right? It's not that it explicitly shouldn't be, but it doesn't have to be. Again, there should be some kind of implicit alignment through the strategy. So 2 more questions, and then we're going to wrap things up. Everyone else, please reach out to me. How does this approach to the lean value tree approach? I don't know, because I don't know the lean value tree, to be quite honest. Your favorite product podcast is? That's interesting. I don't listen to that many product podcasts these days, I have to admit. I think it's like 2 podcasts. Like one is Lenny's podcast. I think he does a phenomenal job. For me, he's like the Tim Ferriss of product management. And the other one I really like is called How to Win from Pay Blaya. Fantastic, great produced, and Sandy good produced. I really, really like this. So I'm going to leave you with these 2 recommendations. Quick last ask. Would love to see your takeaways in the chat. Just post that in there. If you want to learn more, check out my product discovery resources app, or if you want to take things even further, shameless self-promotion, also have a very well-received course on that topic. Feel free to check these out, or check out my free weekly newsletter, or on LinkedIn. Reach out to me. I'd love to continue the conversation, hear about your practical struggles. And that's that on my end. Probably rambled a little bit toward the end or rushed, but yeah, really enjoyed this session and hope many of you were able to do as well.
That was really great, Tim. Really, really appreciate it. I know it's a bit of a world tour on a really complex topic, and I'm sure we could spend a lot more time on this, or engage you even as a consultant to help a product team work through these kinds of challenges. So do really, really appreciate it.
Cool.
And lots of good feedback, and I see lots of accolades and claps and stuff like that coming through on this side. So
nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. So to wrap things up here quickly, I have shared a link to our post-event survey. We'd love to get your feedback on today's session. Feel free to fill that out. We do give away a monthly prize as well for people that share that feedback. So a little bit of an incentive there on that end. If you want to continue the conversation, things that you want to learn about, things that you want to share about how you're using impact mapping in part of your craft, feel free to post that discussion or commentary within our community. We have a lot of community events coming up. Next week, we're talking with Indy Young, who's a noted researcher, and following with Timothy Grimer and a number of other speakers, as well as our Product Makers Summit on March the 21st. I invite you to check out some of our many different events that are ongoing most Thursdays within the community on that side. And if you are interested in speaking, you've got something to share, maybe much like Tim, about your expertise in product, we'd love to hear from you. You can find out more details as well within our community site by searching for the word speak. With that, thank you very much, everybody. And thank you again, Tim, for joining us. Go off and make products that matter together. Really, really appreciate it. Everything we've got out of this wonderful learning session today.
Thanks so much, folks. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.